Good morning again. I think there was a question that involved why our cells don't just clog up with more and more chromosomes all the time.
Angola chuachi dos ti kharlana thabung nanglola chubung mangro dune khangdwe jora chup di thabung nanglola chubung mangro dwe dinde khaji niyo maresni di chua dus.
So here's the idea of DNA division is tied to cell division. DNA replication is tied to cell division.
Ta thanda di khare dewa chaworlana DNA koran thanda dashu chine ani thabung chago che di chago res.
So this is a cell and this is a nucleus.
Ta di thabung res chashana ani di tening di res.
And in the nucleus, most of the time when the cell is not dividing, it just looks like a bowl of noodles.
Dila du thabung nal ta du peche khare lawana thanda di chago che di yo mares thanda dinang la ta du DNA den jo thuba roish thungu res.
A series of steps happens to condense this DNA and to have it double itself because the cell is going to divide.
Dila du di khati lana jela thuru dwe jora di du res and di jela ani thabung di chago che ni thabung ni chago ros.
So let's just consider that this cell has two sets of chromosomes, 4 chromosomes, one set from each parent of 2 different chromosomes.
Ande charla di cha shas pezendo di thabung di na chobung khajurla na shi res ni phani che ni mani res.
So this chromosome has double the amount of DNA it has, but the two copies are still the two chromosomes are still held together.
Dila du thanda dinal khare chirla na korangi chobung di dashu chi res ne chobung ni ga thanda nyam du res dala.
The nucleus now starts to divide because the whole cell is also dividing.
Ta thanda di tening ji dos tening di chagu che gochu res khais na thabung di chagu chi res.
There are actually these very pretty structures that are like ropes that are pulling each chromosome away from its partner.
Ta thanda cha yor lara chromosome di chobung di ani thengi khari cha dor lana di la kuba do di res di ge ani ma thengi res di chobung di.
So as these chromosomes are going away, the nucleus is pinching in.
Dila du chobung ni di kuba ni di thengi yor lara di kuba den jogi chobung di ma khorani ma ni dil thendu di ka so khais na ani tenyung di ma juru res.
So then we're left with 2 nuclei that each have again 1 chromosome from mother, father, 1 big one and 1 little one. 4 chromosomes.
Chesa di ani ni cha du res ni sa sa jela ni dina la ni phani che ni ma ni che di ra res.
It's true that at this stage they have twice as much DNA as they usually have, but that's just in preparation for cell division.
Ta namju yunde gi chobung khajo yogi dab ni di thanda dina lo res di en khare chi kodla na thabung chagu che gozu chi res.
Okay? So the DNA is not doubling inside a nucleus. The nucleus is going to be dividing with DNA replication.
Chesa ta tening chi grang na la chobung mangro dwe di yo mares chobung mangro du dab ni chaw na shi tening ya ni cha res nimdo.
We're going to show a little video. The best part of it is that they have a clear cell and you can see the chromosomes moving.
Ta jela thanda parda din de tengos dina la kharir la na thabung ni di chago chi du di nyam do thanda chobung de chago chi ani seu thung res dina.
I think it's a real cell. Well, let me look at it on the screen. But I think it's just some cells are very clear. Where I went to school, we lived by the sea, and there were lots of organisms whose cells were clear, and you could watch them dividing, and you could watch the DNA, the chromosomes going separate.
Thanga thabung khashi kharir la na thong seu shu res ngara desa saja ro cha sha na kengyo khashi gi thabung thong seu yo ma se khran jo chago che gi thong gu res di.
So this is the beginning. It's not real. This is just trying to show that the DNA is going to be packed up for traveling.
Di thanda remove tingu dalong di ngone mares ta dina DNA di thanda
It's not going to be a noodle anymore. It's going to be this tight, coiled up structure.
Ta kuba dillo sha jo do jora thuba do di yo mares di kharla na ti ni thambu cha de yo de res dina.
Remember, 6 feet of DNA has to fit into something you and I cannot see.
Cheza fit thuk do DNA jora di shu ji ti ni 춘주 슈 tabung na yudu ga zo ming ma thon dinde tigi yores tum du yores.
So the DNA has already doubled itself. It's just being packaged now with these by means of these proteins.
The DNA di ta dabni swetsa restinala an thanda karina du warlana tigar na ma du yores.
So more and more DNA is getting into a smaller and smaller space.
Dile deta saja DNA di ma tigi yora tidu wala saja chunga sa yores.
So stop here. I don't know if you can see it, but these are actual chromosomes that are starting to move as the nucleus divides.
Dile deta thanda khiranzo yabu sigyo na kharshi dige kharelana chobong dinzo res.
So these
di chobong dinzo ni thanda tening di ni khakhira di ro ni chobong dinzo lo cha du res.
So these parts are actual pictures.
Ta di parmoni res.
So they're getting ready and they're going to split up.
Ta di thadi chiyo res khar chela chagwe chela ni la khedu res de.
But those are chromosomes and now they're going to move.
Dile deta thanda yama yogu chingesh da di chobong dinzo res.
So this set is heading this way and this set is heading that way.
Di chajik da di khod warlana chod jol tu das di chadi phal du res.
And there are some beautiful pictures, maybe we'll call some up, of actual pictures of the chromosomes, not a movie like this, but of pictures of chromosomes in live cells.
Dile de thanda dida longye do ras ani par rang gya shagyo chobong de zo kha khedi gyo ra nil dunge tinde par yabu indi res.
And soon after this phase where you can see all the chromosomes, it'll just become real bowl of spaghetti again.
Ta thanda di ni chasa ra di chasa chalyan chobong de zo khar chagla na ni ni DNA thanda thupa dosta di rang ja chagyo res.
Now the two sides are dividing, I think here.
Ta di thabong ni chagwe chigyo res.
I don't know what this is. Oh, this is trying to show you how DNA is opened up to copy itself.
Di kharit tungor la na DNA koran dashu che ra dashu chel kha chigyo di tungyo res.
So this is at the level of the two strands are copying, are splitting up so that they can have a twin copy made.
Di thanda kuba ni juya di kha chigyo res di koran ni dashu DNA di dashu che res.
Let's see where this takes us. Keep going. Oh, we don't want to know about that. Go ahead. I think that's enough. So this is all happening before what you saw on the video. That's how the DNA gets copied.
Thanda nge la longish time bas di ma chung kong la dinde chungyo res DNA kha che di.
So let's say I have an original strand of DNA that's A, T, G, G, C, A on this strand. What is its matching strand?
Ta di DNA ba cha shastra DNA dila phuje khari khari la na A T G G C A yo res ra di kuba chi ra chusu ni de ba kuba ni ba jora dila khari bu yo res dil cha di
T, what's here?
ni ba dala
Okay, perfect. No mutations.
ya bu ta da dos mus kurto che to mas stila.
Now, what happens is this ladder starts to break apart a little bit. I need a red one too.
Ta di themba ji dos di ani kha che bu chu res.
Actually, we'll just draw. It opens up gradually, and what happens is, here's the original one that's going to be in this cell, and here's the other side of the original one. So this was A, T, G, G, C, A, and this was T, A, C, C, G, T. And they've separated now.
Thangbo kuba ngoma ni ra di ni de kha che ni loga cha doas di ni res ku bani de
And they're trying to make a new strand because they know the cell's about to divide.
ta thabung de kha khe gu ras cha go chi gu ras di ha gu yo sa ani kurang gi thanda ku ba shimba ji su res
This is the new strand, so the new cell's going to have an original and a copy. An original and a copy.
ta di ku ba sa ni su doas di su sa je la thanda ngjo di ni ra ras di na ku ba chi khare la na ngoma di res chik di ta shu di res thana ji phajol ta na chi na ku di ngoma ra ma di ta shu di res.
And when the cell is dividing, an A has to fit with a T, and that base is brought here, and so on.
ta ku ba sa du su du phul sung den to cha cha di yo koran cha cha di du res di.
So the two strands make an exact copy of their old partner. By virtue of these, always have to match up.
khai na phul sung di to dang khar lan cha cha di yo ras an che jang ngoma gi khari yo di na shi thanda sawani di chi bu ji kya cha gi res ta shi ni cha di res.
So the new cell gets the mother strand and a daughter strand. This cell gets a mother strand and a daughter strand.
ta dinal ta thabung saw ni cha ras thabung ni dinal khari la na ta di ku ba ama di da an ku ba saw di res kya na shi di ku ba ama di da an ku ba na chung la ra den de ro cha di res.
But this only happens when this nucleus is dividing and they're going to end up in different cells.
ta di khadu cha gir la wa na tening di kha khe che ani thabung ni cha wa de den de chung res.
Okay?
di seu cha su sa.
Okay.
Yes.
We thought today we would just bring up some topics that we haven't brought up that aren't in any handouts that are just kind of, we think, fun or interesting.
ta khazingo la lobti shidyo gi joshi mangbu jora di mai ba joshi sawaj khashi ji da thiwo samsons dikheran zo to yungu gires khashi.
Okay, one topic that I think is very important for our class is the concept of altruism and cooperation.
ta thanda joshi chi khejum bu khari chagor la na ani thanda shimpe la di che an thang na shi ani pha zu phinju thundi che jora dires.
We were reading last night about some of the writings of the Dalai Lama about evolution, and this idea is one that he talks about a lot.
chi khonsa chogi da ma thanda khonsa chogi samju khari yumi jora thanda di shimpe da ani pegyur gala andi nganjo lo yes chi.
So from what we've talked about in our class so far, it seems like it's every animal wants the best for them. They don't worry about everybody else.
dile du semje khande soja khande ji baina quran la yakshu ju gugu yo an shimba du job changma pini quran rang la yakshu gugu yo di yo res samlu samlu de.
It's all about competing with each other, competing to survive and competing to make the most babies.
dile du da pinju khari yor la na dindur chi dinge chi chune che dure an ta na shi pu manga sue dil dindur yo res.
And this posed a moral problem for people when we first learned about evolution.
dile du ta phelgur kor la jandu bala ne mila thambo kangi the thambo di roji cha de res.
They wondered, is the world all bad? Everybody only cares about themselves. If we evolved from ancestors with the animals, do all the animals and humans included only care about what's good for us?
ta dinde baina ta phelgur na dinde shi yo na changma dindur che dile du gal ta changma so so rang samlo tang rang de ro cha di yo ras dinde la du gal la soja changma dujar res lan di thio dili yo res.
But we see in nature and in us, sometimes people do good things for others. Most often you'll see it with a parent sacrificing their own life to save their child.
ta di khadu na di chagi ro la na ne tang chagi yo mares ngala ju nang du chidang i thona yo res phama din su su phuti che du su su rang khare chune mewa sue jora pu che du su su sungyop che du su su kangen nal ju chue din di chigi yo res.
So the question is, does this go against evolution, or does evolution explain this behavior?
ta di thanda trodang jora di phelgyur la gewa chagi re yana di la phelgyur gi deshe ju res.
So biologists have been studying this, and I'll show you some of our understanding of that.
ta chezang kengyu ripo i thanda di trodang jora di gala shimju chigi res ani khodo khari yo me di ta ma thigi insti di ganga.
So if we think about behaviors of one organism with another, we can think for the organism doing the behavior, does it help them or does it hurt them?
ta thanda kengyu khandi ji na socha jora di shi ju gala shayres thanda di shimju di ta shiju di kingyu di la phengu du yana nugu dus la jora di res.
For the organism who they're acting towards, does it help that organism or does it hurt them?
Ana thanda socha di ani korangi ta dewa chi sa phenju dewa chi sa socha shimba jora di la ani shiju di phengu du yana nugu du la jora di res chi.
So when I do something to Marge and it helps me and it helps her, we call that cooperation.
Chezanta ngarani cha shawaina socha ni di ta ngi gi chik shiju di tu ni shiju di ngala e phengyu re phajo di la nigal phengyu yo na dinala phenju ta phenju dewa la ora dinde chagyu res.
It helps both of us, and we call it cooperation or mutualism, and we see examples of this in nature.
Ta phenju gi ta dewa la ora phenju thundik di cha de ros di ngara zo rangjung kham na thoya yo res.
So an example might be termites eat wood, but they cannot digest the wood themselves. Instead, inside of them, they host bacteria, and the bacteria digest the wood, which gives the bacteria nutrients, and they also release some nutrients to the termite.
Ta thanda pesun ro shawana socha ni pha chu phen ro dinala phenju thundi di cha shawana ngazo busangi termite lan businji doas shing sangi di di ro cha shawana shing sagi yor de korangi shing di ju yor na subuna ju thu yo mares di che de korang subuna khare lan thasin bacteria rig ji yores di bacteria di thasin di khare chi yor la na shing di ju yores shing di ju acham mai ba susu la ju ra gres thana shi ani thanda busi termite lagi ju ra yores.
So it helps them both. The termite is able to eat wood and survive off of that. The bacteria has a safe place to live, and it's constantly fed the wood nutrients it needs.
Thana shi da koraniga pha chu phen de res thanda di todan di tawaina thanda budi cha shauna termite korang shing sagi res ani busin thanda thasin bacteria di kho yor la na korang desa je ra ge res termite ki suguna yor res an thana shi chu yang ra ge res.
Have you seen those white birds sitting on top of the cattle?
Paju da indigala cha kauji di digdo phabni digdo khana ju si suesa. Yes.
It's good for the bird because it's getting all the bugs to eat from the cattle's fur.
Thanda paju da mai indigala cha kauji phabgu das di phabdu galo chadila khari ra yor la na paju da mai gi sugu gala buira budin jura yor rasela.
And it's good for the cow because it gets rid of all those parasites on its skin.
Thana shi ani sim thanda paju da mai den zo imba na Kuranzolo keben yoras, Kuranzo budigi sagi yoras, shenden socha di ma meo chagi yoras.
In almost every country I visited where there are cows, you see those same white birds pecking on their shoulders.
Ta nga saja khawa chimba ina thanda phaju da mai den de yungi yora socha den de yo ina chakao de khadu ina nyam do thong de dos.
When I do something to another organism and it helps me but hurts them, we call that parasitism.
Ta thanda soja ningi par dewa chigura chik dila phemba che chik dila nugu yo inas an dila nganzo da shinde socha lagi yores.
An example might be when something infects our bodies and it makes us very sick. It's good for the bacteria that infects us, but very bad for us.
Ta pe shaw ina nganzo subuna nyenga ta idos nyenga ta yoga su thasin den li yoras digi khari yorla na koranjol ta khala ra du ri ne nganzo koranjol kheben yores. Malaria
is very bad for the people that get it.
The question is, do we ever see this? Do I ever do something that hurts me, but it helps somebody else?
Yes.
And we would call that altruism. So I'm curious, they all definitely say yes, they've seen altruism. I'm curious what examples they're thinking about not in humans.
Yes, there are. Karire ki dang khari soja ni par lagora ki da khari ale kidi da loop jinda dil roka che do ani Quran shi do res. So the dog in a nomadic family, it protects the flock of sheep for the owner and it dies, so it sacrifices. So that's an example of altruism.
Yeah, that's a good example. You might also ask, do we ever see I do something that hurts me and hurts the other person, which we would call spite?
Yes.
I agree, at least for humans.
You know it's going to hurt you, but you're so upset you're going to do it anyhow.
But let's focus on this one. We don't see so much of this in nature. Okay, next slide. So, here's a picture of a scary spider. When we think of altruism, we often think of a parent and child, and this is perhaps one of the best examples of a parent self-sacrificing for their child. So this spider, before their babies hatch, will eat a lot of food and get a lot of nutrients. Once the babies hatch, the inside of this spider starts to eat itself. And the spider will regurgitate their insides so that the babies can eat that. The spider will do that for about 2 weeks as its organs are slowly degraded and it's feeding its young so that they can grow strong. Eventually it dies and then the babies eat the rest of the spider. How does evolution explain that behavior? So if we remember, the most fit organisms, the one whose alleles will be selected for and continue in the population, are the ones who are best at passing their genes on to the next generation. So this spider has passed its gene on to its babies, its young. So to help those genes survive in the next generation, the spider will sacrifice themselves. So by sacrificing itself, they give their babies and their genes a better chance to survive themselves into the next generation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So evolutionary biologists see it's the ultimate self-sacrifice, but it's still sort of, it's benefiting their genes, if not the organism itself.
Remember, evolution is not about the individual, but about the population going forward.
So that is how evolutionary biologists believe that there can be selective pressure for this altruistic behavior of helping your young.
다 단다 디 카리가 펠규나 시어나 단다 뉴슈 열니 시유레스티 단다 디 심펜 체기 시주 동에 줘라 펠규다 저 차유레스 뉴슈 민다올다니.
So the question is, do we see the same behavior when it's not parent and child?
다 단다 디 임바나 파마다 부두 파라로스 다 파마다 부두 멤버야 시주 심바 심제 심바 나 요레스 시주 딘데 토야.
So scientists studied this species of bird called, I think, a long-tailed swallow.
다 단다 디 예리 주레스 추디 디가라 심주 추레스 디 당am 주마링부도 주마링부에 스웰로라니 밍타셔레스.
And these birds in the mating season all come together and they try to find mates.
다 단다 코란조 치우딘조 파추 포다 모테 뒤주 줘라 딜레두갈 안 창만냠도 루루치네 아니 포딘조 모담 딜리치니 코란조 담기요레스.
But it's fairly frequent that they fail and they're not able to become impregnated. That it's frequent that some of the birds cannot mate successfully, so they're not going to have eggs.
다 포다 모테나 카브리 커리어로 디 단다 테두 람롱마 유네니 리규치마 페 줘라 디 용구요 마레스 카시나.
And scientists observed that these birds who were not successful, instead of just trying to keep to have babies, once it seems unlikely that they're going to have babies, those birds instead turn their attention and their energy to helping other birds.
다 카시 커리어로나 테오에네게 단다 공화 차기요 말라로 치우딘조 딘데 인도다 망부시 탑시 치니 공화 탑부 지두게 탑시 치기요레스 이네 지두체 마기요가 강이 테두갈라 쿠란조 가르치기요라나 단다다 지두게기 삼로디 파샤니 쿠란조기 차심바요라 딘졸로 로보치에고 주기요레스.
And they're helping those other birds gives those young a better chance to survive and continue.
다 디 로보치니 카리 핑겨라나 지두 유조 딘조 아니 소네 치야다 다 솔롱 치야라 핑겨요와스.
So scientists were curious. Are they doing this as truly being altruistic in helping somebody else at the detriment of themselves?
딜라도다 딘데 시주시도 세리바딘 줄 지월리요레스. 디무네 시주디다 단다 심페레디르 수수 파샤니 수수 삼로샤니 심벌 페 삼로단 치기요디 시주디 차기요레스란 지월리요레스.
Or can we explain it through evolution, where like the mother spider who sacrificed herself, it still benefited her genes. So do these birds sacrifice themselves to help relatives that would pass on their genes?
다 단다 모일랑아조 톰다 부지어 디차샤와나 수수기 리규페 치디 수수랑 솔로당 로스 수수 케벤타요 마로스 디낭시 차기요레스 단다디 디나 수수 부랑다 마로 이네 심벌 페니 심바디 리규페 로보체 디 시주디 치보 차기요레스란 체리걸 치오디리기요레스.
So they did an experiment to test and see, do the birds help more when it's their relatives versus when it's stranger birds?
다치 케바 카리타르라나 체리바이 따지 치두갈라 치우딘주 수수기 핀자요라 딘디나라 로바야가 치두야나 ngomashi walaurada chiu shimba dindela roba yaga chidu dingi para kebartaires.
The idea is the relatives would have more genes like the actual individual that's doing the helping than a stranger bird.
Chi career shoina ta susu pi imba inasra pinja ruyoina di nalo rigje din zunya chagi yorwas shimba mi shimba jida duro inas ta di chana lai thara chagi yorwas ta pi nami chi gi baina ani rigje dinya che ni chi chiu ji baina dinyam do ni rigje di thadeba chagi yorwas.
Before I show you the results, I'd like you to take a minute and talk with the people around and think about what you expect the scientists would find. How many birds, when put with relatives, would help versus how many birds, when put with strangers, would help?
And Kiranzu Rugaru Nala the Chodur Chis and Tio di Karlana Tandasha Sanedani Chadi Tandata Chutuki Mingi Riginzu Robacha Durela. Did the Susugida Namichi Chad Pinja Dindel Robayanga Chiriana Saw Momasho Laura Dindirila Robayaga Chigres Landi. Ne tanga do show in a Kagas child and Kiranzo to do knowledges.
So what do you all think?
Can 주 참에 삼수 거리스. So there is no differences between the two. It will help both at the same time. The pinja the dinde mata ni. Sama keba yo mareslani. So it looks like they will help both types of birds equally.
Okay, so we have we have the hypothesis that they will equally help whether they're related or not related.
Ta chobaji sha res ngaranzo di kharelana chadigi ani tanda nigal roba chigres pi yimba inare ni inare menare nigal roba chipo chigres lani dishes.
Is that the conclusion that most groups came to? Did any group have a different hypothesis?
Keranzo sangma tanda ruga di shegyo da metun yuasa. They have a different hypothesis. Tanda di nyirik mare piu lawar. Nyirik chigre sangma. So there are two hypotheses. One, it will help their relatives, and the other one, like their friends, to which they can communicate better. They will help those types of birds.
Oh, okay. So another hypothesis that they might help relatives, but also friends.
The pinja che and thana she susu thokbo yora dil robo chigre la ros. It depends on the bird. So whether if the bird is broad-minded, it will help equally. If it's narrow-minded, it will help only its relatives.
If it has my relatives, it wouldn't want to help them.
Ni pinja inda robo chig marelas.
Nisana kandara shiude soso sodiji mayara. Jedan soso kanamju koyotina nyam sundi de dela paji robo chisare. Ina kunsoke paji da baba ana tamu moshi ma teso kansan de de ani baba ana sawa da punjare sawa de kindi paji dushi sawa moshi atri yodi vasan dos.
Ani ta susu khari ksu da dio ena dil robo chig resra.
Soba de shari no ina da kunzo ina da kunjo di di ina shem de jara or di da dila ani to de robo chig. So mi de punjare de robo chig kindi kunzo ha ko.
So I don't think that the birds know, like after a long time, they will get to know who their relatives are. So I feel that the bird who communicates with other birds, who are in touch with the other birds, they will help these birds. I feel that this bird will help its relatives. Because it has tried hard to continue its generation, but the bird was not able to do that. That's why it will try helping their relatives so that the family's gene will pass on. My friend is feeling so shy, that's why I will say now. So he said his question is towards that group, because he said like I don't feel that birds can birds know how to identify their relatives. We can't say about the behavior, we cannot say anything about that. So how can you say that after a long time they will not able to recognize their family members like that? Because we don't know the behavior of birds. And we don't know what's going on in their mind.
That's an excellent point.
I see no reason in this, but it looks like you have found a solid reason for this when you say that. So can you say what's the reason behind that? So I think he has not understood what the topic is about.
먼저 달라 시우 등도 들을 간이 조지 들리 전에 안에 상치시 그래서 아니 먼저 만나고 있나 안에 소소 분야다 등도는 예는 같은데 요래 그래서 소소 분야도 좀 모시기 요래 안에 분야 소소 리뷰도 베이스 안에 보면서 봐서 제발로 들리지가 말해서 이날 샤다 등도도 소리 들리요 말해서 봐서 뒤에만 상당히 달라셔야 돼 아니 등도지 임비지야 좀 시기가
So he said like among humans we know that we are from the same family and we do not mix with each other, we do not interbreed. So in animals they interbreed within among the same family members also. So I feel that way. Since you said there is no mixing within the family members because they don't marry each other, right, in a family among humans. But I've seen here in India, there's the people who lives in Katari. So I've seen people like marrying between their own family members.
다시 딘디션 있나요? 안에 딘디 중기대 지난 나오는
If such things have happened, it may be because these people are also like you who don't understand about these things.
안에 저당 그렇게 매가 맞아 그래나 안에 디니시도 봐서 안에 디니시도 들어왔잖아 안에 저렇게 하고 예 소다네
So these people don't know marrying between own relatives, between own family members have bad consequences. So that's why they do these things.
Okay, there were a lot of really good points brought up in this discussion. It was a lot of fun.
Tadi yago chonsons chodur de di kala keran jenne den kechimbo mangbo jishe sons. He said I need 1 minute.
시간선생님께서 제가 시험에서 진로자인지네 다시 마시는 무슨 죄를 시간자가에는 아주 좋은 나라야 시도 아니 이리스탄들아야는 포리리스탄도 뭐 마시는 이리스탄 포리시는 이리스탄 니거에서 도와나는 도와 인지나 지나는 시라고 생각합니다. 그래서 지금은 세세적으로 지금 등하고 파이지스탄 지도 마리지스탄치 자가나로라 마리지스 시라트와 말했더니 선들 나와치니 컴퓨터에서 비행기 시절에서 많이 힘이 좀 잤어요.
In our text also we consider like a lineage from father and lineage from mother. So in India also it may be the same like this. So they give more importance to the lineage from father. So from the mothers they don't consider it much importance. They don't give much importance. That's why they marry between their own family members.
You get a little more DNA from your mother than from your father, because all of her mitochondrial DNA and the fact that the X chromosome is much bigger than the Y.
Tatanda kena tabungna tawaina DNA amani mangale res. That thinking nalda yoyobachra digal thebe mitochondria thanda nuge thadul jiyo digi nanglo DNA di amani yungo ras. And thana she X tanda chobong na taw ana ke x ta y ni ta du gala x di ring ay roas ama ni d ni ma ay res cheza.
Okay, so I have a couple of things to say about marrying close relatives.
Ta tanda pinja parla changsa ge jora di gala ani tis chi she yus.
So in human history, it has been fairly common to marry relatives.
Dila du mi lo ju ma ta wa na an pin parla changsa ge jora de nye tanda nyense na changsa ge di yores lo ju nan.
We think it is potentially very bad for a brother and sister to marry, but not nearly so bad for brother to marry a cousin or second cousin.
Dila du ta nangmi chi gi ta phibyu yin bai nas ra phu pinja phuj to phumu ji na dini changsa ge wa na ani shugen du je shuj thi yores kangi thi yores ina ta susu gi pinja thangbo ni wa la yora dinde na ta changsa ge wa na digas ki kangi thi yo mares.
Part of the reason why, for us, it is so bad to marry a relative is because we have very few babies. So if I married my brother and I have a disease gene, a recessive disease gene, and he has that same recessive disease gene, and our one baby that we make got both copies of that recessive disease gene, gets that disease and dies, that is very, very bad.
Tape shaw na pinja ni changsa ge na ngaran da ngi chuju ni changsa ge wa nas an ngaran ni ga la na za yongi gi thanda rikje juyoro yipshichin niga yipshichin gi naza Quran la jojo la yo che ngaran la yo enas ngaran changsa ge na pugu ji chuna pugu di la kesi yipshichin niga le enas rikje di pugu di te rong tu roas.
You can see that in interbreeding of domestic animals.
Tanda nga zo nang la sugyon chini simje rik jora soja ri dig nang lo pa chu te yo roas.
Breeders of dogs try so hard to make a certain exact characteristics of a dog that they made very close relatives.
Dila du ta tanda kid nyangi rik jora dende indu gala Quran zo ki nang lo te ni sosu lo gwe kejo jora digirang gogudlan an ki te dang di Quran zo gi dam ni ti yo res.
And then they discover problems in those offspring like hip disease or a tendency to get certain contagious diseases because both parents were so closely related they had the same recessive alleles hiding in them.
And the key kejo dirang godulana ta nyu ni de nyam du ti yo res ko di te du gala ni ki din zo ta kibdu ke du gala kangi yo jo da pemu da din de ta nyabri da din mala kangi yo jo din de kangi ti yo res kana na Quran ni nyu shu cha de ras te jo ni de.
For other animals that can make lots and lots of babies, it might not be so bad if every once in a while one of them had a disease and didn't survive.
Hello do mangbu ke wana dine ni chigna lani naza yungi dan khashi yan suni chidungi dine yong si ruas.
Another point that was brought up during the discussion was the idea of being able to recognize your relatives.
The chick de kariles lawana kiranzo tanda pinjana pinjang uzin chitugre tu marla jora di ruas. Tanda chiuna ke shidu dile so.
That's a very important concept to evolutionary biologists, and we call genes that help parents identify their offspring as green beard genes. Yes. Green beard genes?
Green beard, yeah.
Tanda pamagi putula ta ngozin chitungi rijora denzo langanzo ani tanda gya jambu gi rijela dende rosming ta sheres.
Because if you could make it so that your children all had a green beard, it would be easy to identify who your children were.
Tadi ming khajin tar lawana pugu dila kesi gya jambu ki ge na pugu de ngozin chelelo chagi roas. Chezan de ming ta sheres.
In studies, many species are able to identify which other birds or animals might be related to them based on how similar their song is to themselves.
Ta cha den zo nyelu khaga sume ta jora di ta chi khejo kharil ta yor la wana Quran chu gi thanda she tang yora she di khaga stau do dil tani ani tini khaga nyelu me di ta yores.
I think it's remarkable. This is a colony of penguins, maybe you can see it, that these penguins, when they come back from the colony, they can find their baby amongst the millions of other babies that to us look exactly the same.
Tanda kyacha ri penguin yo dende do cha shona Quran zo pugu ta tong sai mangbu dende derchi la ki yo sara dil le du wala ni ta su su pugu damdrogu ras manzo yeba na yawache tu mares.
But they'll go right back to their chick. They all look the same to me.
So let's remind ourselves of our experiment that we're about to see the results for.
Tangarazo yeni takje ju ras di ani dumje khari meta was tigana.
They took birds that had not been successful in the first few weeks of the mating season to mate.
Ta tanda yeni shana je chade zo poda monyam do cheni ani di konga soya thabji chiyor la ra chibdu soya di ani thabji ta thengmani su mangbuji chejel ani kesi machungwa inas.
So they have two choices. They can continue to try to mate, or they can give up on mating themselves and help other people mate.
Dilado ta Quran zo thabshi chira thengmani sungshi thengmon mangbu thabshi chicha jela chibdu soya thu mewa inas Quran zo damkai ni chagi res. Chik dikhar lana yang kyar do thabshi chide jora konga chuya da chibdu ke di res. Chik khar lana di thabshi di zamshani cha shembala roba che di res din damkai ni chagi res.
Okay, so the scientists took those unsuccessful mating birds and they put them in a colony of either relatives or a colony of stranger birds.
Ta tanda thabshi chini chibdu ke ma thungi ri jora di ani khoryuni na shares logolo chi khor shar lana Quran zo pinja na shares ra nyinsen tam shares chi khar shar lana ni nyinsen maingi ri del shares.
They do this for many birds, and here we see these are the birds that were put in a colony of relatives. These are the birds that were put in a colony of strangers.
Dila duta tawji chidu wala ni na shara chi di nyinsen na shares chi nyinsen main bandin shares nyinsen yingen di khari chawur lana thiri na dires nyinsen main na shagyo di dires.
And the height of our bar shows us the percentage of those birds that chose to help raise the other birds young.
Ta cheza roba chiala lu shara Quran sugi chi nyinsen gi dina lu share chi nyinsen main ke na lu du wala ta ngazu gi yacha ta waina nyinsen na lu shagyo digi roba ma chi jo thon res takjena.
And as you can see, the birds who were with relatives almost all helped. The birds who were with strangers, almost nobody helped.
Ta tanda chadi susu nyinsen na lu shadu wala peje changma rojre da gyalero da geje gyal roj dende roji roba chi res peje changma roji roba chi res susu nyinsen gi ruka na lu wainas ta nyinsen main gi ruga jora dina lu du wala peje ta peche roba chi ma res dina.
So to scientists, this suggests that perhaps altruism and helping others is about better passing on your genes to the next generation. Even if it's not through your own babies, through my sister's babies, helping them, I still get more of my genes to the next generation.
Dila duta seriba de juda tanda pelgyu na shidu wala champagne la jora di khande shawar lana susu gi nangmi da ta nye gi rigyu jura ma pe di shagyo susu rigyu di pe ma thune susu nangmi chi gi nyinsen di rigyu ma pe dilo roba tanda champagne di dilo ma duslan shigyo res.
Okay, so scientists also, when studying altruism and helping of relatives, love to study insects like ants and bees.
Ta seriba de ju tanda champagne la jora di ani tanda chi khari nal ta yor la na simje shimba nal ta yor res chi tanda this is ant di burong ma rig res ra.
They are a very strong example of giving up your own ability to have babies for the good of your relatives.
Ta di khari chi or la na susu gi kebel chi gi ta niba di jam shagi ra di ma le tang ni shimba la ro chi di niba di dil tang la di shi res.
In ant and bee colonies, there is often just a single queen who is the only one to have babies, and everybody else is just self-sacrificing themselves to help her.
Dila du wala ta tanda puthoma gi chang lo ji ta wa na dinal mangbu shu ju res puthoma chuji di res dinal na chik so da chumu ro la res dila digi ani tanda puthoma bu den zu ki res shimba den zu sangma su su gi ta niba den sangma le dong chi ni dilo ro chi res chumo dila.
So bees and ants give up their ability to have babies, and they also often give up their lives protecting their queen.
Chezanta di chumo di sumjo che chudu Quran su niba jura pu ke di niba di pheju chi yo mares an thana shi khonjo sumjo che chudu kabre rangso lo do yan chi yo res.
Evolution explains this by the bees in the colony being very closely genetically related to each other.
Tanda pheju na ta wa na tanda di da khari nyeu chagyo la na pungwa riks la di nyeu cha de res Quran zu pheju.
Okay, it's hard to see here, but these are an animal that I personally love. They're meerkats.
Ta di dana simje jda dil ngarang gaw yes di ming la kharlana meerkat res.
And this is a video, but I don't think it's going to play.
Very cute. Depending jo res socha di. Ta di longi jire ta di dugu na ha ko masons.
Oops, no. That's not cute.
Dinding jo min dalas.
But so meerkats live in social groups. It's okay, it's not important.
Tanda di socha meerkat la chda di chuzo simje ro changmanyam du rukhana digi res.
And there is one female who's the one in charge, the matriarch.
Thana jita di rukha jora ding nalo la ta godi chinge chi kharu la na kim moji gi res meerkat na.
And she can kick other meerkats out of her colony if she doesn't like them.
Ta susu kyu chi gyora tanda rukha ding nalo la ta chik zo cha dyora gen king di digi ma pi na gi pe gongja res. Morang tanda modi na mandro ai na pi she res shimbal.
And she'll often, if another female in the colony gets pregnant, she's likely to kick them out of the colony.
If she is pregnant,
If another female besides the matriarch gets pregnant, the matriarch might kick her out of the colony.
ta tanda kyu chi rukha chi gyora digi na la mo shimba ya yora meerkat. Puan tanda di goti di masive. Dende chi kesi ta nge ko ai na di tanda rukha di ni ma pi res.
And the meerkats in the colony are not all related to each other.
Ta tanda Quran kyu chi gyora soji tanda rukha chi di na lo Quran ju changma nyense cha dyorla na mares.
But what we see some of the other females do is they don't have babies, and instead they babysit the babies of the matriarch.
Ta cheza ani deni ni pi gyora nge ko ai na Quran ju mangche kharchi la ne nge ko chu yo mares. An cheza Quran ju tanda zo goti chingi jora modi digi pu de an ta jong chi chin digi res.
So how do scientists explain that behavior if the female is not related to the babies that she's babysitting?
Di lo de ta tanda Quran yin se mare la ra mo shemba di goti chingi di ine phajo goti chingi gi pu di taro chi yo res la ra ta yin se men ge pu shemba taro chi ta so jong chi yo ras di ani theri ba de zo de she khande ge yo res.
So scientists have studied these females, the ones that stay and babysit and the ones that get pregnant and get kicked out, to see how they do.
Ta theri ba de zo digal ta je chi yo res khashi khar la ne nge khordu gala pi ra pi ni ta rukha de ne loga chara digal ta je chik chi yo res pi sa yo di thana chi chik di thanda nge ma khor ra che ni thanda goti digi pu shi ke ra di ta do so jong chi ni de nge rig ji ra di da de ni par khebar ta yo res.
The ones that get pregnant and have to leave don't do so well. It is not easy to survive as a meerkat by yourself.
Cheza da di rukha ni ma pi ra nge khortu Papi sa jelda Quran chi bul hadu wala ni namju ro chele din sta da dum ma to ka nge shu thi res chi bu denge di.
But the females that stay and babysit do much better several years down the road.
Ta lo mang bu jel ta du gala thanda khunal de denge jora ruhana la ti pu so jong chinge jora su su pu me na so jong ching dige rig de ani thanda lo mang bu jel ta ani ki Quran jo chele ta ta ya bu stu thunge thon res.
They might, if the matriarch dies, become the new matriarch and get to have their babies.
Ta thanda goti chinge moji yoro meerkat di kesi shi wainas di ki chabla ni shimba jili yo res yang goti chinge ani di ya Quran ram pu ke jora di jurim di do di yo res.
Or sometimes, as the colony gets bigger, they will run away, but bring some of the babies that they babysat with them to form a new colony that's successful.
Di la dus kabre di kange ro the du ras di the du gal khonso lamsa pu den jo khine du res and di ani jel mutu ni ya kyu sawa ji chayu res.
Okay, here's a picture of bats.
Adi pawang di chi par ji res di.
And these bats have to go out and hunt and eat every night. If they go 3 nights with no successful hunting, they die.
Ta chen la khadu na di rida ya su se che ga du res ra kisi chen sum la Quran zo se di mara aina ani it dies.
Yeah, 3 nights in a row.
Chen sum ta mutu ni se mara aina an di shi du res.
So scientists studied these bats and they found something interesting. When they saw a bat went out and did not find any food to eat, when it comes back, another bat will regurgitate some of its food to give to that bat.
Ta tanda pawang chi du ra chen la se che ga sama che ga du du gala sama mara che ta lo le oinas 아니 파왕 심바디기 단다 코랑기 세 라교 줘라 디 단다 마 칠로 된 줘라 칠로 된이 세 마랑이 될 띠요레스.
So that bat is giving up some of its own food to help somebody else, and it will do that for bats that are both related and not related.
다 단다 사마차 드니 마랑기 파왕 줘라 딜라 세 랑이 디기 마 칠로 된이 띠요레스란 세주 마테라 디테디 소소기 닌센 찍부 모임 버체 닌센 마인게 라이 띠요레스.
So that was puzzling to scientists, and they were thinking about what the bats are getting out of that. Are they being truly altruistic, or are they still getting some benefit?
Tadi shiju jura tanda se matu ni shen la te jura di ta ono kora shempengi tanda shiju di na yana kora la keben ju yana aslani di tiwa di ligi res.
So they did some experiments again, and they found that bats were more likely to share their food with another bat when they had been very successful in finding food. And also, if that bat had previously given them food, they're more likely to give that bat food when it needs it.
Ta tsiribai taji shires taji shidu kharinyer lawana koranzo se yakpu ji rawana matu ni shen la te jura di roba chigi res. Thana shen ni roba che di sula chigi lana ngola koran la roba chigi jura di la se te gi ta khogap la ora de manga yores.
So it's a little closer to altruism because you are giving something to someone not to help pass on your genes, but because you're trusting that you're building this relationship and you will help each other.
Dila duta thanda di roba che di shimpen do chagi yores khaisna di susu regu pe che du mares di shiju di kharlana shimbanyam do jawa yabu che da shen la pen da di chab yores.
And we see behaviors like this, where it's really about building these social relationships, and we see a lot of helping each other in the community. We see that frequently in primates.
Tanda socha digi rigjido lundi socha chayora dinze rina tawana chizo simje doje chamanyam do de an phazu phinju dewa yabu chinge thundi yunge dende ro chadu res.
Who, as we all know, are our closest relatives.
Ngaranju hagu res nganju gi ninse nyeshu di khari chadu lana di chadu ros.
So that is how evolutionary biologists sort of think about altruism, in that we can see organisms helping other organisms, but there's always some benefit in the end, whether it's helping your genes survive better or whether it's helping somebody else with the trust that you will get help when you need it.
Ta chik di kharis na thanda theri pai thanda phegyu theri pai ora Quran gi thanda shimpe la di samlo tanda dende res chik kharela na shimba la pheni ani susu gi rigyu di ma pe thuye jora di che an chik di khari yor la na rigze di ma pe di che niwa di shimba di la yeje chini pha phem bai na khunju gi jela susu phingre sani samlo jora yeje di yores.
There's another big question in evolutionary biology. Next slide. About why do we get old and die?
Ta ngajo gero khaji ni du yores ani she jora kharchi ni chi yores lan di thio di yores phegyur na che.
Why, when we age, do we get wrinkles and we move slower, our muscles are not as strong? Why do we have to age, and why do we need to die?
Anzo gero khajin dugu yores ani subu den zo khug tue che khomba to shira gyama tue nyerma tue da disama kengo tarwa di che an thama shi dre di khajin res lani thiwa di ligi res.
It's estimated that if we didn't age, the average age of a human being would be about 600 years old.
Ta kesi gengo che jora di ma chawa inas anganzo gita choba chiwa ina khazus mi di chone khagas chitur la ina mi se di 600
Yeah, about
600,000
600 years.
lo khajis de tur lana choba chigi lo tuges de tur lani choba chigi res rupse roji.
Because people would still be killed by accidents or diseases.
Kaisna mi la du gala khranzo dungdo da dende kangi thine ni nasa da dende ya chidwe yorwas.
So can evolution explain why we might need to age and die?
Ta pelgyur gi lamni ngzo she tu res di ta gengo cha da she jora kharichin gugu res la.
What do you all think?
Party tawo ridiora ko ridi shia me baji ani kutsa mo tazanga ridi jemo jemo sun party tin sa chason zone ko chason shindo nge.
So he's given an example of a cow, like if cows keep on living, if they don't age, they will keep eating grasses, and at the end there will be no grasses left on the earth.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Perhaps you need one generation to age and die off so that their offspring will have enough resources to be successful.
제가 단단 아주 랍직 나라다 gembocha shidroyo ena rapchima niwa jilira di koran zulani tangegi khari gugu me tat di samal hadi roas chimba dang maras chikrang de dewanas.
So from the perspective of evolution then, why do we continue living after we have made our young? For females, isn't our purpose done? We've made our offspring, shouldn't we just die and allow the resources to be used by our children?
Tadanda pime kimengi la harlana puke di resra puke sana lengin di dupsa res tadi kesa jela ani kimen di shidona ya dikta di yo mares khailana tanda jungong ta sa da khari baina dil ha di ros pugudila.
There are not many species where the individual keeps on after it's unable to reproduce. There are not many species in which the individual keeps living after they can no longer reproduce.
Dilo duta ngeri khashana yores tanda puke sa imbaina ge ani jela ke thu mena ge tanda chune chini de dinge de mangbu yores.
And why do women stop being able to reproduce but live on, while men, although they're aging, can still continue reproducing?
Dilo duta kemen do cha shaina lo yas le oina ra kebil chegi niba lora da kebil che jam shagi yoras ine phudo phodo cha shaina khran zu lo yal le oina ge kebil che tu duas ti khachin res.
Evolutionary biologists have a hypothesis for both of these questions. The question of why women continue living after they can't have any more babies, we call the grandmother hypothesis.
Neta thanda chi khari shiur la na ta kime phime ro cha shaina lo je chik le du di jal pu kya yo mara di in imba ina ge thande khunjo chune che tu duas di la cheri ba choba khari shawor la na grandmother la na momora momo nam shalan chik ning sta she res dila.
So human babies require a lot of work for many years, right?
Dilo du mi ita pu chunju ro cha shaina mi nyeri na ta na pu chaira di pu din zo ani ngjo so jong chelo lo mangbu shu ta gu res pu dila.
So if I continued having babies right up until I died, then the last few babies I had that were only, 5 years or under would probably die when I died.
Dilo du ta ngaran ro cha shaina pu ke de oinas an jela ngaran shue tu zo le du gala no pu chungshu de longas do imba na nga shue na pu de shiru ras nyamdo.
So in terms of making the most successful offspring I can, it's better for me at some point to stop making offspring and instead to help my offspring be successful and help them have as many babies as they can have.
Cheza mutu ni kemendi pu rang ke de na lo chumbu chana ke de na jela quran shue na ta jong ching rang maris la ra di za ani tuju chi le du gal kebel chegi ta tuju jora zamsha anjel susu gi phuju yora dige ni pu de ta ma so jong chegi di khoga biya ga yoras.
In contrast, in other primates, once the baby is weaned, not taking mother's milk, it's on its own.
Dila do thanda londe soja rijda dinde pu imbaina amadi ne oma tungu yores pu dunso oma tunge jam shaden khorarang losu da do she yores rawachini.
So the hypothesis is that grandmothers survive after they can have babies in order to help their children and their grandchildren survive.
Ta cheza keme dunso pu ke jam sha sa ene ge thande chune chigi yor la jora dila choba kharisha lana momo choba la jora di roas dila do momo digi susu pugu che pugu yora chaw samote di khoga yores lani di choba chi yores.
This brings us back to that second question. Why is it not the same for grandfathers who can continue having babies up until they die?
Dila do ta di pume cha shawana kebel che nibo di jam sha yor la ora di anine phona la di ta di mindos pobo din zo imba na thande pu ke gi ta nibo kebel che tu yor lani she yoras titis mandro chai dos tini.
And to address that, evolutionary biologists go back to the idea of the green beard, like you mentioned. How certain are we that I am related to you?
Dila du tango ni rigze nganzo gi thanda gya jangu rigze la jora di ro chashana ta nganzo ni ni le khaga sime di ta di chagi roas.
Well, as a woman, I am 100% sure that that baby that came out of my body is mine.
Ta ngara phime ji ma chashani ta ngara subu ni ma ke pu jura di ngara geja gyala thu is ngi pu yin la tu roas.
Men do not necessarily have as much certainty as women in terms of, is that baby really theirs?
다 분명히 임바이나 수수 수부라니 부기도 다 디부디 녀레란 게제 게셰투 요레스 다 포도 차샤이나 다 부지 끼어이나 딩이 부레란 게제 게셰투 갖고 차요로스.
So if you're not completely sure that this is your grandchild, it might be better, instead of investing energy into helping your grandchild succeed, into making more babies of your own. If you're not completely sure that this is your grandchild, rather than investing your energy into this child, it might be better for passing your genes on to keep having more and more babies.
딜라두다 탄다 게제 게셰투 요 마르라라 디수수 기리규다 탄다 차오 디수수 랑가지 메 라마투 베킹기 나 카리야와 라와나 수수 기리규디 양교케 케벨치에 탑시 치로아스.
And that is how evolutionary biologists understand the difference in why men and women's fertility in terms of aging is so different.
제잔다 kugu kebel gi niba laura dida ani lo gero dwejura digi ani samsu seribai samsu dires.
And they have even, you might think that we're very removed from this in modern society. In large part, we are, and men and women equally help their children and their grandchildren. But scientists have also done some studies on humans.
In many parts we have seen the same number of.
So in modern society, we might think that we're sort of removed from this and that men and women equally help their grandchildren, and that's largely true.
Nata tanda tengdu tawa nata tis losu chane ani mi gi tanda nyering na tawa ndu pobo inare momo inare ani niga gi ani tanda chawa samu sugyon chiba chigyo di tongdu res.
But scientists love to do experiments, so they have also studied humans, and specifically they've studied human grandmothers and how they treat their grandchildren.
Ta ceribala taji chiwa mangbu shuju res. Chik di khari chayarla na tanda momo denju susu chawa chamo khandis tagyong chigyo imejera di ani taji na chuwi res.
Now, I have 2 girls as my children. When they have babies, I will be 100% sure that those babies are my grandchildren.
Ta ngal thanda phumuni yores an phumuni dilya pu ki ras an di pu ni di ngara gaja gya shetu res di ni di thanda pu ni ke oinas di ni dinge chau chamure la ni shetu ras gaja gya.
If I had a son and he had a baby, I would not be completely sure that that is my grandchild.
Ta kesi ngala puji ke oinas ra pudila puji chu oinas changsagani ta di chau re chamo khari na dinge gaja gya ngi chau re chamure lan shetu maras.
At least in terms of genes. So when they study human grandmothers, they find that grandmothers put in a little more effort and time with the children of their daughters than with the children of their sons.
Ta pobo do cha shawana khrangi ta nibodo manga khol tangurlana chau samo susu phumyo gyuni yongge jura dil manga tanguras phuda duroinas.
There are, of course, many other explanations for why this might be cultural explanations, but evolutionary biologists might interpret it in that they put more investment where they are more certain that those are their genes.
Tatanda pelgyuri po Quran kharishigur lawana mide jo khande imbaina niba ma khawa tangir lawana susu gaje ga ije gyota dinge chau chamore lawana dil niba ma tangi yoji shigures.
These personality traits are hard to put on a gene. Usually it's the result of many genes.
Di tanda keju tuen jora mi nando di rangshi di ani tanda di rigje chigla ra ligo maris rigje mangbu shugen chigures.
As well as environmental issues.
Tanda di dan dewe koryu da dewe ani kangi mangbu juros.
But there is one gene that's been studied in depth that they call has to do with social behavior.
Ta rigje chigures rigje chi khari da dewa chagyor lawana chizo nala penju dewa chidang jora di dan dewe rigje chagures.
Some alleles of this gene make you very outgoing and social.
Ta tanda rigje dil ta du bala khashi rigje di khari chigyor lawana dinde yogengi ani mide jo chizo nala pha thuen pha su dewa yaku chinge dinde rig chagures.
Some alleles of this gene may make you more shy or like to be alone.
The rigze dige elil chik khariyor la ne elil ni yora chik di phado chizo na ro ro de thogro su eli chinge cha de res chik di ngo cha ani so so rang de ni chura de yores elil di.
So scientists test people of these different alleles all the time in games or in psychology testing, and they kind of call this gene the love gene.
Love gene? Ta thanda rigze jur la sa di thanda rigze di ta je chedo khunju ge mi din zo timu che ju thega na shi semkam record the dewe thiwa din tang in the chigyo restaurant ta je chigyo res and di thanda rigze di la cheri bai ming khari ta la na chamje rigze lan ta res.
But of course there are many genes that control how you behave and environment.
Ta chidang anjo chiju khari me jura kheju di sama ani khuriu da dewe rigze mangbu shugen chigyo res.
So I think today we went through what I consider some exciting areas of thought in evolutionary biology that I think perhaps intersect with Buddhism.
Ta tharing phegyu da dewe mangbuji ne de mangbuji sherwas di phegyu nangchu da thumbaroji resam gu dos ni.
So I have a feeling this might give you a lot to think about and consider. So I encourage you to do that and to keep researching and thinking for yourself what makes sense. And of course, we're always happy to take questions.
Dila du dida dewe da susu gi samlo tang ani thiwa din zo khari ligyu me jara di sama khiran zo samlo na sharo chis thanda khari khari phinju thungyu me da dile.
So we maybe have time for like 1 or 2 questions if anybody has them.
Ani thiwa yo ana thiwa chikni thuju dos.
Anne thiwa chi da sam 그러나 다른 대세들아 다 나와서 거기 대세들이 리뷰시만 해야다 대세로 이제 가서 리뷰시만 깨면 문제야 아무튼 샤를 주속된 너가 차려 와 대소가 아니 편집이 되서네 대시로지 깨끗이 좀 말했어.
So the population of monks, it's a kind of isolated, and we have taken pledge that we are not going to reproduce. So how do you explain this in terms of evolution about the monk population?
So my explanation, and I will say that there is not an official evolutionary biologist opinion on this, so I'll give my personal opinion.
Tadanda pegyuri bai gani ta samju dinde jirelani yo marwas thanda di khinazu chisodila andi ngarangi samju di mashi is cheza.
Would be that you all have chosen to make a large sacrifice for the benefit of the human race as a whole.
The Kiranzugita draw me rigorani, the Chazang la Pian Chidu and Kiranzugita, and the Gebel Mache Gita, and the nobody Kiranzugita, Ludon Cheruas.
I think the work that you're doing is helping to preserve Tibetan culture and also helping to shine the light for the world so that we don't self-destruct, as I'm afraid we could.
The Kiranzugita, Pebe Rishun Yarsa Chiada, and Tanashi, Zamling Yongla, and Keben Yong, Digi, and Migu Kiduras, Tandata Kangi Cheduras, and Lindy. So,
in that way, by helping ensure that we don't self-destruct, you're helping ensure that the human race as a whole continues.
The Zamling the Ma Nyamdu Ras, Koryudi, Chidangi, Tama Yeri, the Tau, and a me Yeridil. Di any Kiranzu Hakuni, Anita, Pen, the Diche, any Kiranzugi, the Redonche, Didoji serious.
Tata Vishima put one year. Shanti said, Ni Taki Kosho Kumpolas, Sewa, Tisu Somati, and Zeriki, Pina Arakan, and Zeriki, and Shin, and Kasa, Medicine, and it's very big Karasabro. Me, song da Karso, song Tongsho, ni Chuchitan, but the woman is. Other the ship Somati, he could look to check the June.
The unity shaking.
So, someone wanted to name them. Told us. Maso someone should be better to show.
Okay, so from science we have explained everything depending on the structure of the organism and the chemicals and all through all these. So isn't there a way like we change our behavior by how we think, by the way of thinking, by our way of thinking? Can't we change our behavior?
Excellent question. We've talked about this a little bit before. So when scientists study identical twins, those twins begin life and end life with the exact same sequence of DNA.
Tiwadi yago dusa ni seribai taji shidu tsema yoro puni dil taji shidu gala kurani DNA tawana gochu du chiba che ani zamsha chiba roas kurani.
However, DNA can be decorated with further chemical modifications, and those are based on your environment, your experience, how you're developing as a human.
Dila duda DNA kurani thambo gochu du chiba roas ina DNA de gyurdo dwa roas di gyurdo kharil kini dugo lawana susugi nyongwa da ani khoryo giwangi da dinde tene ani di DNA la gyur dugo res.
There are some pretty cool studies where they took mice and they trained them that when they smelled something, they would be afraid of it because they would get a shock whenever they smelled that.
Ta taji chires di khajilana chizi yora chizi dil thambo timach liu res zeroji di tima di khawda andi jala logi lo khue jora di khue res andi gi ta chizi di jala tima di khawda choroda ani ko shi res chizi di.
And then so that smell and that experience did not change the sequence of their DNA, but they believe it changed how it was decorated.
Tima di khawda she jora di shiju di ni DNA la gyo doyere na doyo mares di khorim dila.
And when those mice had babies, and the babies did not interact with their parents, they had no prior knowledge or experience of this smell. When those babies had that smell, they experienced fear. Because they inherited it somehow, not through the actual ACTG sequence of DNA, but through its decorations.
Le jurdo doyo res ra ina thanda khorim ACT yora di khorim de gyo doyo mares ina DNA le jurdo doyo zang thanda ani ti pugu jora chizi di ani thanda jala pugu di kesa jala tima thanda chi gyora zero di tima di khawda ani pugu di shinang ke da di yungu res.
But I think that result surprised many people.
Di ta thanda dumde juda di mi mangche hangsa res di taji di dumde thoni.
And although we've decoded DNA, we have not decoded the decorations. We're just beginning to understand it a little bit.
Ne thanda ta DNA khorim ta du galam gyo do mejo doji thon res thanda di chizi pugu di nan ta du.
Plus, in your brain, which we know even less about than your DNA, cells make connections with each other that get strengthened with experiences in life.
Ta thanda ngonjo lebegi wangza thabung na tawa na di ngonjo misena nyongwa khari nyongwe na di ani tetu doji chadu ras lebe na la.
So certainly your brain, we say it's wired a certain way, that is subject to changes by your environment. So that would obviously affect your behaviors.
Di la do lebe na deltu chaya jora di insusu nyongwa da khoryu li shugente ne gyo du res. Di gi ani khoryu da de nyongwa te ne ani susu shiju de gyo du res.